Yo, Jason here. Welcome back to the Dental Lighthouse podcast, and want to unpack some concepts or one specific concept that we've been talking a lot about in our coaching group, and seems like it's a question I get almost weekly about time management. So, um, you guys that have heard me before, you've heard me talk about the ideal week, and it's funny, we all have concepts that we know and understand that seem almost like riding a bike. But when you introduce these concepts to someone new, you realize that there's a lot to unpack. And in our newest coaching group, it's full of really great doctors, team leads, office managers, operations people. And I rolled out this concept to them, and then they're asking questions. They're asking for clarity on how it works, and it just reminded me that people are at different levels, right? Or if we envision life as this path, people are at different places along the path, and sometimes I forget that. And it's good for me to be grounded and recentered, and shooting a video like this or recording a podcast like this gives me an opportunity to kind of break down key concepts of a system for our listeners, so they can take advantage of this system to the best of their ability. So let's call it the ideal week system, right? And what do I mean by the ideal week system? Well, routinely I get people that say to me, Jason, I don't have enough time, or Jason, how do you manage to do all of the things that you do? Or specifically when we're having conversations about losing a key team member, um, it plays out the same way only every single time. You know, Jason, I just lost a hygienist to the doctor up the street. He's paying $1.50 more an hour. And then I will say, well, did you know she was looking? Was she happy? Did she feel a sense of fulfillment or joy in her job? Did she feel like she was underpaid? You know, can you give me some feedback on that? And the doctor will routinely say, she seemed happy. I haven't really had a chance to talk to her, but she didn't bring anything to me. And then I'll say something like, well, when was your last one-on-one with her? Well, I don't have time to do one-on-ones. I'm just so busy. And then you can start to peel back the onion, right? As soon as I hear that, I know, okay, the reason that they left wasn't necessarily because someone's paying them $1.50 more an hour. The reason that they left is because they didn't have a leader that was truly caring about them and that was truly looking out for their best interest. And because you didn't have the time to do that, now you better find the time to advertise, recruit, hire, and onboard another hygienist. And I can assure you that if you didn't have time for one-on-ones, you definitely don't have time for all of that. So once a doctor starts to realize a certain level of pain, just like anything in life, change is extremely difficult until there is a level of pain. And once the doctor realizes that level of pain, they're open to changing something. Same thing with office managers, same thing with operations people. It's the classic, you might be 15, 20, 25 pounds overweight, but you're okay with it until you see a photograph of yourself in a very unflattering light. And that's the pain that you need to make a change. So when you're ready to make a change on how to better your time, I would ask you to consider this system. Now, there's no productivity hacks here. There's no like, I can teach you a way to do 100 things in half the time. Like, that's not what I'm all about. What I'm all about is realizing what's really, really important in your life, both personally and professionally, and making time in your calendar to be fully present and dedicated towards those things. One of my first coaches almost 25 years ago would say to me, don't tell me what's important to you, Jason. I can look at your calendar and I can look at your checkbook. I'm dating myself by saying checkbook, but I can look at your calendar and I can look at your checkbook, and I'll know right away what's important to you. So we may say things like, well, doing one-on-ones are important, or um, making sure I study the P&L is important, or going to the CE event is important. But the reality is, don't just talk, don't just tell me what you're going to do, show me, okay? And that's what this calendar is all about. So first step that you need to unpack is, how many hours in a given week are you going to dedicate towards work? And that can range tremendously depending on where you're at in life, how much money you need to bring home, how much you love it, how much you don't love it. But as a general rule of thumb, if we're talking about doctors here, and again, this system can be applicable to office managers, team leads, um, operations people, really anyone. So, how many hours per week are we going to dedicate to work? Most people will fall in the range of 30 to 55. And I use the number 55 because there's a ton of research to suggest that once you get beyond 55 hours per week, you start to make decisions that are not in the best interest of you, the organization, the business. Your judgment starts to get a little clouded. Um, so don't go over 55 hours a week. I would encourage you not to get even close to 55 hours a week, but just trying to communicate what the research says, you could go up to 55 hours a week. But choose a number in between, say, 30 and 55 hours a week. Once you have that number, you have to decide how many hours of that number is dedicated to clinical dentistry, to where you are tied to the chair doing root canals and hygiene exams and crowns and fillings and stuff like that. So, what amount of that time is dedicated fully to that? Now, if you are working 4 days a week and you're working, let's say, 9 hours a day, that's 36 hours. So, right away, when you're doing this calendar, you can do it on a Google Sheet, you can do it on a Google Calendar, just create a new calendar. Put in exactly in 15-minute increments when you're at the chair. Now, it could involve, like morning meeting and stuff like that, but just put those hours in, right? So let's say you chose, you're going to work 50 hours a week. You're a founding doctor, and 36 hours of that is spent clinical. Okay, so now you have 14 hours left per week for work-related things that are not clinical dentistry. So you need to take those 14 hours and break them up into two groups only. Okay, what I call deep work and what I call shallow work. And deep work is a concept from Cal Newport. He wrote a great book on deep work. I would encourage you to read that if you want to go into the weeds on this concept. But everything I'm telling you here is pretty much summarized from his book. So, what do we mean by deep work and shallow work? Well, deep work is work that you do in isolation. You completely turn off the noise, you turn off your phone, you put protective measures on your browser so you can't creep into Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. And you truly work on things that you're exceptional at. For me, it's content creation, it's system development, it's refining a system that is now broken because of our size that we're growing. It's consuming content like reading a book, and what I'm going to take out of that book to make my work life better. It's watching online CE, it's watching a webinar, and being fully present for that and just consuming the content and literally asking myself every minute, how does this relate to me? How does this relate to making my business better? That's deep work. There is no distractions. There is no noise. I put in earplugs, or I put AirPods on, and I'll listen to classical music or focus type music if unless I'm obviously watching content online. It is amazing, and until you experience this, you won't realize it. But it is amazing how productive you can be when you're not constantly distracted by other people, by your family, by notifications on your phone, or by the temptations of creeping over to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever your vice is, right? Deep work blocks ideally are a maximum of 90 minutes, and this is research based on cycles in our brain, but could be as short as 45 minutes. I have found that less than 45 minutes is not super productive for me. So if you're starting off, let's say your deep work block is an hour, and strategically put those throughout your calendar. Now, for me, deep work blocks are most beneficial in the morning when I have my creative juices flowing, when I am the best version of myself. Um, how many deep work blocks per week? Well, it depends on what you and your organization needs out of you from a professional perspective. So start with 3 to 4 um, deep work blocks per week. Shallow work is everything work related that I need to do where I am interacting with someone, either virtually or in person. So for me, my shallow work is one-on-ones with my doctors, one-on-ones with my leadership team. It's being present for my meetings with my organizational leadership team. It's meeting with realtors, it's meeting with bankers, it's meeting with everyone that I need to meet with, my contractors, from a work perspective, one-on-one, fully present, either virtually or in person. It's also returning emails. It's also all of the minutia that needs to get done, but you don't need to be fully present from an energy perspective to do it. Now, you need to be fully present for one-on-ones, but for the other things, you don't need the best version of yourself to show up. That's what I would call shallow work. So those are the three things. So there's clinical work, there's deep work, and then there's shallow work. And everyone's going to have a different mix of how much of that they need based on where they're at in their professional life. I would encourage you to not relegate yourself to doing things just to be busy. So the fear is always people choosing to do something because they want to feel productive, when at the end of the week or at the end of the month they can look back and say, did it really even matter that I did that? So you have to identify and maybe utilize your team, utilize your spouse. What do you do that really matters? What do you do that only you can do, and that's going to take your professional life to the next level? A great book to unpack some of these concepts is Patrick Lencioni's book, The Motive, right? Where he talks about you as the founder, you as the leader. These are the things that only you can do. These are the 3 to 5 responsibilities of, man, if I don't do these, nobody will. So I need to own them. So that's clinical work, shallow work, and deep work, right? I would encourage you to do that. The rest of the schedule, get really specific. So do you have a morning routine where you like to meditate or journal or pray or read scripture or whatever? If you do that, then put that in your schedule. When are you working out? When are you spending time with your kids? When are you spending time with your wife? When are you spending time alone, in the sauna, taking a walk? When are you spending time with your friends? Are you playing golf? All of these things, schedule them, because if you don't put them in your calendar, then they won't happen. Ask me how I know. So every 15 minutes of my entire life is scheduled. And am I able to maintain 100% accuracy in that schedule? Absolutely not. But I'm pretty darn close to 90%. And I go back on Sunday nights and look at my schedule and say, okay, where was I successful and where was I not? Where did I schedule myself too tightly and where did I leave myself a little bit of breathing room? So you can always go back and look and say, okay, this week I need to tweak this, this, and this. And again, I just want to reiterate that the idea of multitasking is a fallacy. And this has actually been proven in research, where there's no such thing as multitasking What researchers call it is task switching. So even if you're performing clinical dentistry and you get a break between patients, if you think you can use that 5 to 10 minute break to return emails, you can for sure. But the reality is, you can't fully engage in the email and you can't fully process what that email is saying. You can't fully process your response because from an attention perspective, you're still doing clinical dentistry. So the scientific term is called attention residue. What happens is you still have your attention on clinical dentistry, and you're now trying to do another task, return emails, do a one-on-one, write a note to a patient, whatever it is, right? You cannot show up as the best version of yourself and do that task. It's just literally impossible because you have all of this attention residue. So that's why this idea of blocks in your schedule or an ideal week is so imperative. You do clinical dentistry up until a certain point and then you turn it off and then you go on to whatever is next in your schedule. Same thing like when I come home from work. I come home from work at, let's say, 5 o'clock. I leave my computer in the car, I leave my phone in the car, and you bet your ass from 5 to, depending on the day, 6, 6:30, 7, I am fully present with my family. There's no distractions. I have gotten rid of everything that would cause me to be distracted and take away from the attention I'm trying to give my twin boys at the dinner table, or the attention that I'm trying to give my wife as we go for a walk, or whatever it is, right? So these are little habits that I've developed over time, that once you come up with the realization, or once you realize the realization that there's no such thing as multitasking, there's only task switching, and then there's only attention residue that's left over from task switching, you start to realize that if I'm really going to be present and be the best version of myself for this particular task, then I need to be all in. There's no such thing as multitasking. And once you start to come to this realization, you will be amazed at how productive you can be in the moment. For example, if you're going into a deep work block, let's say you need to create a system on something like your hygiene cancellation protocol, whatever that means to you, right? I have been in situations where I've tried to develop a system like that, like in between things, like as I'm multitasking, and it's taken me weeks to do, right? Versus dedicating 60 minutes, turning off your phone, putting protective measures on your browser so you can't reach certain sites, and just being intimate with the work. You will get that same work done in 45 minutes. Like, no question. It only happens to me every single time. And if you can develop the discipline to be present in that deep work block, it will be amazing. Along the same lines with shallow work, if you can be present for that one-on-one, if you can be present for leading a weekly team meeting, if you can be prepared and present for meeting with your bank and not checking your phone, not responding to emails, not any of that other bullshit, you will be amazed at how much more productive you can be during that shallow work. So just a couple of key concepts I would love for you to consider. If you're interested in seeing my ideal week, it changes about every 6 months. For example, it just changed last week because the kids went back to school, right? So in the summer, my ideal week was scheduled a little differently because the kids slept in so I could get stuff done in the morning. And when they woke up, I wanted to be fully present with them. Now that they're back to school and they're out of the house at 7 a.m., I'm changing my ideal week schedule. So it has to be a little fluid. I change it usually every 6 months or so. But just go through the exercise of getting it out in the open, and bring on an accountability partner, your spouse, your operations person, your office manager, and say to them, like, I am trying to keep to a specific schedule. Here it is. Can you analyze this? Let me know what your thoughts are. And most importantly, can you help keep me accountable to this as we move forward? I think you'll find just unbelievable freedom in something like this, and clarity with knowing what you need to do depending on what time of the day it is. You know, not to throw salt in an open wound, but people that tell me, "Well, I don't have time," I love to respond to them. Well, the reality is, you have the same hours in your day as Mother Teresa had, as Thomas Edison had, as Abraham Lincoln had, and they were able to accomplish some great things. You know, why is that? Because they were really, really, really disciplined with their time, because they didn't do busy work simply because they wanted to feel like they were productive. They chose what matters. They realized that they have a specific skill set that only they can do, and they worked like hell to do those things. And the rest of the stuff they either forgot about, or they delegated, or they batched up into specific blocks of time, so there wasn't a lot of task switching and attention residue. Hopefully this message helps you guys. If you want to see my ideal week, or if you want to unpack some more of the concepts that I'm talking about from an ideal week perspective, go to the website, dentallighthouse.com. You can get a hold of me via email or text message. I'd love to go a little bit deeper with these concepts if that's something that you're interested in. Have an amazing day.